Thanks for having me and thanks for inviting me along. And thanks for Kirsty for my introduction of my academic knowledge now. What I've been asked to do today is come and give you a bit of an insight into some of what the community sports clubs are saying, and from more of a national level. So it's been great to be able to hear the local stories and your lived experiences of what you've had to go through over multiple years, but obviously increasingly so. So hopefully this will just give you a really brief little snapshot of what is happening nationally, and I think you'll find that what this region is experiencing is probably a lot more, obviously, as you know, than other regions, and it's maybe either not on their radar, and then because they're not being as significantly impacted. So just right from the start, so I'm from AUT University, Auckland. So I was born and raised in Auckland, but 3 years ago I moved to Tairua, which is a little beach town in the Coromandel. So very similar kind of smallish community, and really involved with the clubs there. We were impacted, we're impacted a fair bit by weather events, not as much as here, but maybe more so than other areas. So we had, during Cyclone Gabby, as we refer her to, our main route into the Coromandel was shut down. So that was a year where we had not our usual route over the Kopu Hills. So a lot of our businesses suffered in terms of the tourist money, but also for us, a lot of us commute to Auckland for work. So what was an hour and a half drive ended up being 4 hours. So a lot of financial impact, and schools that were across the Kopu, kids had to either change schools or do online. So big impact, still impacted, but fortunate that we managed to get a fair bit of finances in the region to help with the roads, which is obviously not the same with all areas. So I will spend a bit of time. Basically, what I'll do here is I'll just take you through some of the insights, and I'll leave it to you. I like to leave it to you to think about how it has any relevance to what you do, and where you sit maybe on these questions for your sport, if you're a part of a regional or national sport organisations, some kind of reflections on how that impacts. So, I mean, we've all heard about the changing climate and how it's impacting our community sport and those who do it, the inequity in terms of who's impacted and not. However, although we can anecdotally talk about these impacts, and some really amazing stories about opportunities and how people are going about and clubs are going about making changes and innovative practices. From a research perspective, there's not much known about this. It's still a really new area, and it's something that myself and people like Holly and so forth are becoming more increasingly involved in, both from trying to connect what we know from an international research perspective to how we can help you that are doing the hard work. And we know that there's an increased need for those on the ground, the community clubs, on how to manage this, how we can help with resilience, and what the role is with clubs in this space as well. So that's where this kind of the National Sports Club Survey comes in, to try and get a snapshot or an understanding of what's happening at the community sports club level. So you may have heard about the National Sports Club Survey. If not, please check your club's emails if you're a part of a club come August. So every year we have the National Sports Club Survey. Basically, it's an annual snapshot of the management and operation of community sports clubs, and it kind of sits within, we have a range of different surveys or ways that we collect data of sport in New Zealand. So Sport New Zealand has a couple of great things that look at the voice of the participants, so from an individual participant level, and then we have Active NZ, which is more of a wider participant activity-based one. So National Sports Club Survey sits within this storytelling in terms of looking at the club as an organisation and how they, run their sport within their community. So similar to what we've seen this morning, the local story, and this is kind of these numbers and things and so forth are just part of the story. So yeah, so with these with research and so forth, they are of value, but you take them how they work in your context, if that makes sense. They're not the be all and end all. I wouldn't go and make decisions based on them. They're part of a wider story, talking to people. So yes, so the National Sports Club Survey, so it's through AUT Sprins, so we have a sport research performance centre at Millennium up in Auckland. But we also, in collaboration with New Zealand Amateur Sport Association, so they are like an advocacy group for community sport in New Zealand, so they're all very independent. So last year was our 7th year, so the data that I'll take you through is from our 7th year, and this year is our 8th year so we've been around for a little bit. So we estimate there's about 7,500, about 8,000 sports clubs in New Zealand. So we have a database of just over 7,000 of them. So only ones with this database. Thank you, our students that we paid to collect that. And so we send the survey out every year come August, September. And we, on average, get about 1,000 responses each. So from a research perspective, that's a great sample. And it covers all the regions of New Zealand and 80 plus sports. So we've got quite a good coverage. This area, we would love to have a little bit more. We're a little light on numbers, so I'll get in touch. So obviously every club gets the email, but obviously we've got a bunch, there's challenges in relation to time, capacity, another survey, who are these people and so forth. So when we get RSTs and clubs involved and the regional and national organisations involved to give us the tick and go, please do it, it's a lot more helpful. So I got your number. So yeah, it's just a complimentary. So there's just a little bit of a background about some of the insights. So typically the person that completes it is either an administrator, president, chairperson, or so forth. So whoever picks up the emails usually is the one who does it. Okay, so the following slides will look like this. So some numbers, but I'll walk you through them anyway. But basically each year we have a range of items that we have the same every year, so we can see trends. So we've got 8 years of trends, a whole range of stuff. And then each year we also do key themes that are really, when I go to things like this and I talk to people and those in the industry about things that are important. So last year when I was having these conversations, this increasingly kind of interest and impact of climate and the changing weather was something that we needed to really know more about. It was becoming more important. So these are the insights from this. So firstly, we asked about impact. So we asked, in the past year, has your club's activities been negatively impacted by the weather? So on average, 55% of clubs said yes, they are negatively impacted by the weather. When we looked at the type of sports, no surprise, water-based sport clubs were more likely impacted, but also larger sports clubs were more likely impacted. Larger sports clubs are probably, the size of sports clubs are probably different down here than what I know they are. So on average, nationally, a sports club has about 200 members, and that stayed pretty stable. We had a bit of a drop to 180 during COVID, but we're back up again. But we have some of those mega clubs up in Auckland that are bumping it up, 1,000 plus. So I've just pulled out some of the different data here. So maybe the clubs that are most impacted versus the clubs that are least impacted. So those that are a little bit different from the national average. So you got tennis here saying most impacted. So it's quite interesting. Some of the clubs. Obviously, these are all perceptions of the clubs. So tennis most impacted, equestrian. Then we had some of golf. And then the more traditional football, cricket with cycling as well. And then least impacted, so we got a lot of those indoor sports, right? We'll go through a little bit more about the indoor sports later, but yeah, squash, least impacted, following by the indoor bowls. Interestingly, we had rugby saying that they were least impacted, which we found really, and we have usually quite a good number of rugby clubs, so it's an interesting one. Maybe they just play through it, I'm not sure. Swimming, badminton and hockey, so some interesting insights. And then we looked at, I just pulled out some of the region stuff here. So this region here is on the national average, which is interesting. I think that probably doesn't reflect based on what we've been discussing where things are actually at, but once we get more numbers in, we can be a little bit more confident in our numbers. But based on region here, we can see some of these smaller regions, Nelson, Bay of Plenty and so forth, impacted. South Auckland, so what we asked was in the past year, had they been impacted as well? So South Auckland, obviously we had a lot of Auckland floods within the last year, but interesting that South Auckland, so lower socioeconomic, are perceived to be more impacted, and so that goes with that inequality of impact, right? And then we have a little bit less than the national average here, Manawatu, Canterbury, Otago and Taranaki. So just some interesting things. We did, so alongside some of those, what we call number-based questions, we also had some open text where we could ask them a little bit more about how they've been impacted. So if they say, yes, we are impacted, we ask them how, and this is kind of based on some of the key things that came out. So obviously financial impact, huge. Number one was the financial impact. We've got a tennis club here, and you would have seen it in Kirsty's as well, the Browns Ice, something similar maybe, an Auckland-based tennis club here, having 80,000 worth on damage, and being closed for loss of facilities for months on end. So big financial impact. Storm damage to waterside facilities. And changing weather patterns affecting our sailing schedule. Insurance costs, we've talked about that already. That's a yachting club in Canterbury. And then the cancellation due to weather, mainly wind factors, sometimes rain. Any event that doesn't run as reduced sessions is a loss in revenue. So from a volleyball club in the Waikato. So range of sports, range of regions, having a financial impact. So a lot to do with the ground conditions and deterioration. So we've got a hockey club here in the West Coast. Twice this year, heavy rains have resulted in turf drainage, systems not being able to cope. So a lot to do with drainage issues throughout the responses. So postponed games, which we know impacts on finances. Wet weather leaving the turf soft, and I also reflect on some of the things that I were talking about this morning, some of the experiences where it's cumulative as well, so it's not just the one-off events, but it's multiple events that are having this impact on the ground conditions, right? And then those without those who are on mobility aids and so forth not being able to access some of the green and the golf club. Infrastructure issues, so not just the outside-based sports, but a basketball club here in Manawatu, Wanganui area. Games have had to be moved due to leaking roof following some heavier than normal rains. So whilst we think a lot about maybe the water-based sport or the ground, the grass-based outside sports, also those indoor sports we're seeing are being impacted as well with, older facilities, or even, a lot of this weather is impacting those that are not even old. So, danger. So we're seeing an increase in danger. Events are cancelled when high winds or heavy rain make road cycling unsafe. So Cycling Wellington Club here. Equestrian is outdoors. Any wet, windy or cold weather impacts us. Plus it can leave the grounds dangerous to ride on. So the increase in danger, a whole bunch to do with council access. We've done the 2023, one of our themes was local council and club kind of interaction. And we heard one of the great recommendations and learnings from the impacts here is that relationship with council and starting it early. I think challenging, based on some of the insights we found in 23, where that club and council relationship is really strained, particularly in some areas like Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, the larger areas with the councils quite big, where it's a lot of fairly restrictive. So important relationship, but has some challenges. So a lot here, usually rugby or football clubs who use the council grounds, finding that any type of rain, no matter how big or small, the councils will close the facilities down, not allow any games to be played, which interrupts, obviously, and which the clubs don't agree with some of the times. Okay, so that was the impact. So we know clubs are finding it, most clubs are finding some kind of impact, but it's really different based on region and how they're being impacted. And so how they're being impacted and whether or not climate and weather impacts is a priority. Our argument is that if it's a priority, it's going to be discussed at their board meetings, at their committee levels. So we asked, is the climate and weather and its impact on sport activities discussed regularly at your club's or committee board meetings? So is it something that you talk about? So what we found was, yes, 55% are impacted, but only 34% are discussing it at their club levels. So it's not really on that radar. And you can see here some that are more discussing it, some sports that are discussing it more. Equestrian, they're all over it. Football are discussing a lot, and yachting, whereas some that are discussing it less so, netball, swimming, and squash, for examples. And then we looked at what are some of the actions. So we worked with Sport NZ, Cursed Sport NZ, to look at some of the actions that potentially clubs are doing and talking about at their club levels. And as you can see, there are a range of different actions that we have here, right down to paperless club communication, so something really basic, emails and so forth, less paper. So a lot of them are doing that, a low-hanging fruit. But there's some less used actions, like a specific person on the board who's looking at climate, environmental, weather impacts and so forth. And a club environment days, so are you taking the club out to do some planting days or something like that? So still a lot of way to go here, basically. And I think what this is reflective in something that we will do in the future is do the same questions again in a couple of years and see if this has changed and see are there any specific sports that this has changed and so forth. I think while I'm going through this, if anyone's got any questions, just shout out throughout as well. So we looked at some of the ways, what are they doing? So some are spending their time upgrading facilities, so improving that drainage that is having a big impact. So we've got a netball and rugby club here from the Bay of Plenty, improving drainage and utilising a turf specialist to advise on maintenance and turf management. And then others, yachting club, investing in facilities to make them more resilient where things happen. A lot of talk about Plan B or postponement days. So we allow spare days in our calendar and backup weekends reserved for training events and equestrian club there as well. So a lot of Plan B days in case that there is, weather events that mean that a 10-week season ends up being a 6-week season. Planting, we've got a fair bit of clubs that talk about doing some planting, particularly ones that have trees and so forth in the area. So we have a golf club here chopping down hazardous trees to replant with native trees, which we know are more resilient with deeper roots. And a hockey club here in Wellington, who is strongly linked to their local iwi and community and assist where possible with planting the local waterways and other initiative activities to reduce climate change. So a long-term kind of outlook for both these clubs. And then we've got others that are looking at relocating. So a football club here in Otago, we are negotiating to partner with a local college which have an artificial turf. And we have discussions about potentially moving the club rooms if storm events cause river flows and sea levels rise, a yachting club. So some potential relocations due to being impacted so much due to weather and the climate. So schedule changes. So also a fair bit of clubs that are looking at changing schedules. For example, a motorcycle club that are looking at considering not running events during the hot seasons, January and February, due to some of the heat issues that we don't really talk about here, but I guess motorcycle in all your gear and so forth, that's got to have an impact. We're seeing a lot warmer weather. I think last year, right, the warmest year on record. And then athletics club that extend their season to make up for those missed club nights due to the weather. So some scheduling changes. But all on all, the most we've seen is things like it is out of our control. We can't do anything about it. It's weather. So they can't see where they can have an impact. This is by and far the biggest theme that we saw across the of what people are doing. So being an outdoor sport, we just have to roll with it. Whatever weather happens, equestrian club, and nothing we can do, we just have to live with it. Rowing club in Marlborough. So by and far, not really seeing that they've got any control of the situation and there's nothing they can really do. So we also asked how concerned they are. So they're being impacted, right? Most clubs are being impacted, but how concerned are they about their club's ability to be able to maintain their club activity at their current rate, at their current level due to the risk of climate impacts in future? So are they concerned? They're being impacted. Maybe some don't think that they have anything they can do about it. It's out of their control. So what is the concern? How concerned are we? And this is a number that I probably, if we do this again this year or next year or in a couple of years, that I imagine will increase. And I think that's why we're all here, right? So yeah, almost half the clubs are concerned about their ability, which I think should be a lot higher. I think we should all be concerned. The most concerned, you can see these sports here. Outdoor sports, all of them. And then we have the least concern, so some of those indoor sports there as well. With some least concerned ones, there also being some big sports, right? Hockey, turf largely, but netball and so forth. So it's just interesting. So that national average is that 46% there. So when we look at the different where sport is taking place, I think that's really interesting, and this is something that was quite significant. So you can see obviously those that are based on lakes, rivers or waterways, natural waterways, they are more concerned, rightly so I think. Outdoor grass fields are up there in terms of their concern, and then those with the artificial surfaces and those that are indoors, least concerned. So still some concern, but not as much as the outdoors, which will be impacted the most and are impacted the most. All right, we also asked about support. So what, if they were to receive any kind of support, what is it to be able to maintain what they do, and with the impact of the stuff, how can we help them, right? And I guess my job as a researcher in finding this information, as well as being able to track it and figure out where we are at the moment, is to be able to pass on this information to people like you, people like Sporting NZ and so forth, to show it. So really important to understand what they need. So education was a key thing that came out of it. So we would like more education and to educate our parents and their children. So they want to be able to educate, so they need that education to be able to do that. Northland Rugby Club. Education of members to understand the issues and what the potential impact is. So I think, and what we found, and if we tried to stay away from the word climate change, but that's still quite a dirty word and controversial. So there is still a fair bit of pushback in terms of it throughout there is definitely out there. We definitely got pushback in the survey. We had people saying that climate change isn't real. Very interesting. So there is still a bit of pushback out there. So education is still really important, I think, and what our role is in that. Obviously funding, grants to support clubs to continue to break even and continue operating at times when we're affected by extreme weather events would be useful. And so had some great opportunities here with funding, but understanding that funding and how it can be used in times where we're not in crises. Assessments, so support with assessment on fields for drainage, a lot of risk assessments, so help with assessments of storm events eroding the land in front of the club and modelling on these events, so understanding what the impact would be specifically to their context, so then they can do something about it. Season change. So we talked a little bit about clubs were already changing seasons or looking at adding Plan B days and so forth. So people wanting support with season change from more the regulatory governance structures. So Bowls NZ would have to have different opening and closing seasons to be able to help with the weather and so forth. And a cricket club here in Taranaki said Sport NZ could greatly assist by preventing winter codes from playing their sports in summer and overlapping our seasons. So I think which is an interesting perspective, because a lot of clubs are doing Plan B days and postponement days or extending their seasons, which is then having an impact on other codes which are having an overlap, right? So here, a cricket club here in Taranaki is recognising that and that challenge. And another thing, not sure what's available, don't know what's out there. So golf club here in Wellington, not sure what support would be available, or what we need. So anything would be handy, as we don't know what we don't know. Don't know of any kind of support other than monetary to replace equipment that might be affected. So not really understanding yet what is out there, and I think the resource hub will be a great help, and some of the other activities. But at this stage, don't know what's happening. And then no support available. So there are a range of clubs that said they don't need any support. Canoeing Club in Canterbury, we've got a good understanding of climate change and earthquake risks and are factoring those into our planning. And then Archery and Badminton Club in Auckland, we are active and don't need support for the obvious. So some that need support, some that don't know what's out there, and some that are not needing support or don't see the need for support. Okay, so in summary, that just really gives you a really national kind of snapshot of where things are at the moment, kind of a stake in the ground, and it'll be great to see over the coming years how that changes, especially as we get some initiatives happening and probably more, weather events happening, and whether or not concern impact is going up as well. But basically, clubs are being impacted. You guys know that more so than others. And some clubs are doing some positive actions, others are not impacted or feel empowered or think that they can do anything to have an impact, or just don't recognise that how their activity of sport can change when something happens. So targeted support, proactive measures needed to help these sports clubs. I think we're going to find that there's going to be an increasing need for that. And so I think as we go through the coming years of the National Sports Club Survey, this is definitely on our radar, and we'll be doing some targeted interviews post this one with regions that are impacted as well, to have an idea of how they're being impacted and what are those kind of lived stories. Numbers are great, but it's also great to follow that up with some stories to be able to share. Awesome, that's me.
Thank you so much, Mel. I think your point around concern is interesting, and probably if we looked across the room or people's interest in this coming along to this event, we see those in the outdoor sports, particularly the water sports, feel like this is something that's more concern than some of the indoor sports. But we've got time for a question or two for Dr. Mel.
Can I ask a question? As an ex-Ed advisor, I used to travel Highway 35, 26 years, visiting schools, helping the sports program. Tomorrow's schools put paid to that. What's your opinion of the support schools are getting today?
In regards to the
Physical education and preparation for football.
So I'm just going to repeat that question through here. The question from Paparo is, because you've been focused on clubs with your survey, but the question is around schools and school support for physical activity, physical education. Is that right, Ralphie? Okay, over to you, Mel.
Yeah, so while I'm not an expert in the schools and so forth, I definitely have opinions. So happy to share. I think that it's pretty fragmented, the support of schools. And from what I've seen, it's really based on what a sport can bring, and less. I think the teachers have been left to manage the physical activity of the kids, and then that depends on the ability of the teacher, right? So I think there's definitely need of more support there, but we've got awesome opportunities like the local RSTs and so forth, but I think it's really fragmented based on where you live. This area is obviously spread out a lot, and so access to that as well. But no expert, but not perfect. Yeah.
Anyone else with a question? Oh, yes.
Oh, Hilda, just a little part I'm just interested why rugby league was excluded from your survey. The reason I asked, obviously I'm involved with it, but they actually have bigger numbers than some of the other sports that you had in there, and you might have a good explanation, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so why question was rugby league have a lot of representation in terms of clubs, more so than others, and why they weren't included in the survey. So we do have a lot of the rugby league network in our survey, but it's down to the number of clubs that participate in the survey. And so typically each year rugby league don't have enough numbers, so we would usually see under 15 clubs, which gives us a little less confidence that the numbers are correct, if that makes sense. So if we have more than 15 clubs who participate in the survey per sport, we have a lot more confidence. In saying, so they should get the emails, but in saying that, love to connect with anyone who, like yourself, might have some connections or some mana within the club space, that when it comes down, we flick you the posters and whatever and say, hey, everyone, be involved with it, because the more we can feed back to you guys about your club and where it sits nationally and so forth, the better. Yeah, would love that. Let's do that. I would love that.
I mean, research is only ever as good as the people who participate, right? And so if you put it out there and people don't participate, you don't have the data. So these relationships are awesome going forward. I think we had a couple more questions. Let's have one more and then we'll move into our next talk. So one more partai for Mel.
It's just a quick one. You don't happen to know the percentage impact on Waikato, do you?
Oh. I definitely do and can give it to you. So if we can, also that was the percentage impact on Waikato. So I definitely have all that information. So we'll exchange emails and I can flick you through that.
Thank you, Mel. Such an interesting set of data you have there. So thank you for sharing that with us today to put our place-based knowledge into a broader context. And Taryn, one more question, one more partai.
I've got a Dr. Mel. I found your data quite interesting myself, and now I understand that it goes on, even though you've got 7,500 clubs, It goes by who participates. I found it quite interesting because there was no perspectives from any of the clubs in Tairāwhiti, and being that we were probably the worst affected with the floods and with climate change. So I'm interested to see how you build your networks with a lot of us community-based clubs. Ellie spoke about rugby league, rugby, and all the other codes. But I'm also interested in, I found that really interesting. It was like all of the kind of rich elite sports were concerned, and then not so much for the. So just if we're going to get into perspectives and that stuff, definitely. I think we need to do some networking around that.
Yeah, agree. And I think so definitely in terms of, like Holly said, about the data, and it can always be perfected. So coming to these things like to these workshops and so forth is the perfect way that we like to share. It's still, even though it's 7 years old, it's still a new one. So like I say, you can't make any decisions based on what we've given, but it's interesting. Similar to you, I find it interesting that the smaller sports that have less funding more so are showing as less impacted. And that's also a perspective as well. So are they more, we can get on with it, as opposed to some of the other sports? I think with the number data, you can't tell those stories, which is why when you put it in relation with the quotes and the lived experiences, then you can, then it makes sense, or it goes, well, that's interesting. Why are they saying that then? What is their perception? Yeah.
And just one more question. It was just around, I might have missed it in your kōrero, but who owns the data? And then what is the data used for, and how can it benefit those people that participate in it?
Yeah, 100%. So the data is owned by AUT, so we are strongly independent so we work alongside organisations like Sport NZ and so forth to ensure that what we collect can be passed on a lot easier. So we own the data, which means that we're really strong in that, because it means that we can pass it on, and people are more hopefully open in passing it to us. So we own the data, and it can be used for however is useful, basically. So if there's some data like Waikato that need data, we just need to go bing, bang, bang and pass it on. So no payment for community sport type stuff. It's there for you.